Hello, my name is Courtney. I am a mystic, a teacher of quantum healing, energy healing, the shamanic arts, and today we're going to be talking about grid work. So this is one of the things that I get asked about the most out of all of the things that I talk about. Grid work is something that people are really curious about, and I feel that it's one of those things that isn't often explained within the sort of spiritual communities, or it isn't fully understood by a lot of people. And so today I wanted to talk about the different archetypes of grid worker, and we can, we're transient between these different archetypes. Sometimes we might be more closely associated or embodying one of those particular archetypes, and other times we might be embodying other ones, right? So something that is really important to know is you can be a grid worker who is stationed in one area, and you might be stationed there your whole life, right? So I have seen this particularly in past lives with people where they were stationed in one area around one particular ley line, and I have one of the most amazing things I've seen in my past life work with people is a client I have who came to me, and we were exploring certain things that were moving within his field, and we found this particular lifetime where he was a steward or a guardian of the Michael ley line near Glastonbury, and he was there for his whole life, and that was his work, and it was sort of early 19th century, and he was living on a farm that was like his family's farm near that area, and he was mute, like he couldn't speak. And so we were talking about how interesting it is that there is always a sacrifice that comes with a gift. It's like these two things. You have this amazing gift where you're super psychic, you're super in tune, you're doing all this work with this ley line, and yet you can't communicate with your external reality. So there's always a sacrifice that comes with a gift, even in our day-to-day reality. Now, if you're someone who's super psychic, super in tune, there's certain things that are going to be more challenging for you compared to the everyday person who maybe isn't as attuned to the subtle layers of reality. And so, when we're thinking about, okay, am I a grid worker? Am I stationed in one particular area for a particular length of time? Or maybe I'm in the more nomadic category right now, and that impulse, that call to travel can be solely based around grid work and what you are exchanging within those energetic spaces. So right now, in the last 4 months, I have been to, I think I've been to 15 countries in the last 4 months, and that has, for the most part, been about grid work. I'm also coming to the end of my Saturn return, so there's, this things going on in my personal cosmology as well that are being mirrored back to me through this travel process, but a lot of it is grid work. And I have often been in that position of being a nomadic grid worker. I moved house something like 12 times before I was 15 years old. So I was always living in these different places. When I was really young, sort of 4, 5, 6, I lived with my dad right next to Roslin Chapel. And if you know anything about Roslin, Edinburgh, it is part of the Rose Line. It's a really important, really sort of constantly emitting these frequencies of the new earth. It contains a lot of the old memories as well of, occult mystery practices. A lot of that is connected with the Rose Line, hence why Roslin Chapel was built right on it. So there, when we look at our own personal history, where have we lived? Have we lived near any of these major points? Have we lived along any of these particular ley lines, which, we know to be places that are emitting high frequency information at various different times? So looking at that can be helpful. You might also, as a grid worker, get sent places that you're just like, oh, there, there's nothing on the map, or there's no, particular set of information of you're like, well, why am I here? And you could just be there as a beacon of light, as somebody who's there to just help transmute the energy. Often, if you're someone who has it coded in to be a grid worker, to be a healer, to be a space holder, to be someone who is a steward of the new waves of human consciousness, then the places that we go, whether we like it or not, no matter kind of what we're doing, we are emitting light, we are emitting waves of information and allowing others to be able to sync up with them. If that is in your blueprint, if you are a new earth blueprinter, if you are someone who carries those energies within you, that will be happening on some level wherever you go, right? It's just that at certain points you might be really called to a particular area because of certain things that are moving within the currents and the energies of that place at any given specific time. So, when we're thinking about why we're sent to places, sometimes that information will be really obvious to us. Sometimes it won't, because it is so deeply and profoundly cosmic that your little human body, we can't even fully understand. It's too vast. It's too, a myriad of a million different multidimensional reasons why we're sent to any given place at any given time. I had an experience recently where I was in Japan. I was doing some really deep grid work in Tokyo, and I knew that I was being called to leave. It wasn't a long period of time that I was called to spend there, but I knew that I was being called somewhere else, and I kept getting that I was going to Phu Quoc. And I've actually been there before, and it's right on my Jupiter. It's not far, about 200 kilometers from my Jupiter line. So as well, thinking about astrocartography, bringing that in can often be helpful for grid work too. And so I knew it was close to my Jupiter line. Jupiter means expansion, growth. I actually went there when I was about 21 or 22, and it was the first sort of long haul travel that I'd ever done. I went with my partner at the time. I planned, organized the whole thing, and I was like, I really want to go somewhere far. I'd not been, much further out of Europe at that point in my life. And so it had this real hallmark of being somewhere of really deep growth for me at that point in my life, and still holds that symbolism for me today. But I could tell that there was another reason why I was being sent there. And if you research that sort of Phu Quoc, that area between Vietnam and Cambodia, there is a lot of UFO activity. It is a hot spot. There is a lot of oceanic stargates. And even when I went, years ago now, I saw all these craft with my partner. We saw all of this stuff happening in the sky, even though I wasn't as aware of grid work and things like that then. I know now that still, even the reason why I was called there was to do some deeper work with the energy, with the undercurrents there. And so I was like, okay, it's interesting that at this point in my journey, I'm being called back there now. So I went, and I was there for one day, and I was told, yep, work's done, you can go. Like, you should leave. Like, not as in you can stay and just hang out. It was like a leave, like you should leave. And I was in a hotel that I'd booked because it was right near the ocean, had a sort of ocean front. But as soon as I was there, the energy was very chaotic. The staff didn't seem to have good management of the guests. There was a lot of drunk guests. It was not somewhere I, as a woman traveling on my own, I as a woman of color, I as X, Y, and Z, I didn't feel fully safe there. And I had this whole thing of I spent so much freaking money to get here, to travel 6-hour flight or whatever it was from Japan to Phu Quoc. And I had all of these very human level frustrations of one day, are you kidding me? You're literally, I've been sent here for one day, and now I'm receiving information that I'm meant to leave. And, often things like that do happen in grid work. Maybe you just needed just to touch base, but actually it isn't a place that's going to be supportive for your energy long term. And it's one of those things where you have to override the, those human level concerns about the material world and about money and about that sort of sunk cost fallacy of like, well, I've put this much in, so I should get X amount back. We have to let go of all of that stuff, because when we're in that grid work, when we're really deep in that grid work, that shit doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter about the money you spend. It will come back to you one way or another, whether it's money, energy, time, information, whatever it is, as long as you are genuinely following the yes, you're following that higher guidance, you're following the psychic information that you're receiving, as long as you know that was coming from the deepest levels of truth within you, which I know it was. I just had to relinquish those very human level concerns. The higher mind is not concerned about things like that, but our little human selves sometimes do get that anxiety around things like that, or even just considering it from that sort of double consciousness perspective of how do other people perceive it. It's like, yeah, I flew all the way from Tokyo to Phu Quoc. I spent one day there and then I left. And that in and of itself to a lot of people will sound ridiculous. It will sound like, chaotic, or like, what are you doing? Or, all of those types of things. But as long as you're rooted in the truth of who you are, and you know that, yes, your journey is not going to look like other people's. It's going to look very, very different to that, because of your soul mission and the way that you have encoded things into your reality, what you have volunteered to share with this planet, to be a bridge for. As long as you are attuned to the truth of that, then we can just destroy and uncreate. We can just let go of those levels of concern around things like that. So a really important thing to bear in mind is that journey is not going to look linear for the most part. And so as well, this is also applicable when we are stationed in one area. I was in Ireland on and off for a year, and I literally traveled around the whole country in my van. I then, found one area to stay in that is incredibly powerful, also connected with the Michael line. And I really wanted to stay there on a more permanent basis because I love Ireland. I have a lot of Irish ancestry. I feel so much more connected to that land than I do with Scotland, despite having grown up in Scotland. And I really wanted to, settle down, have like some security, and just know that I'm in this idea of security, right? This idea of security that I was curating at that time was based around this notion of staying in one place, building community in one place. And my soul, my higher self, had other ideas than what my sort of personality level consciousness wanted at that time. And so after I'd been in this one place for 6 months, I moved in at the start of the eclipse around March, my birthday, and I left literally the following eclipse, which was in the September. It was like eclipsing in, eclipsing out, and it was so perfectly timed astrologically, but my human self had to really reconcile with, oh my gosh, I had built these timelines here and I really wanted all of these things to emerge within this place, but also having to honor that I was there at that time for that specific reason. I was there to exchange codes with the land. I was there to receive from the beautiful holy land that is Ireland, to remember my deep ancestral past life, cosmic connection to that land, and then to also relinquish it and know that its energy is still, that current is still running within me. And I had the most amazing, incredible experiences with the fairies, with the fae, with just the Tuatha, with all of the different frequencies that exist within that land. It is so just insanely magical. But I got to this point where I knew that I was being ejected. And I actually have a whole video about being ejected from the land and what that can look like if we as grid workers who have a higher level soul mission to be in different places, if we overstay our welcome in a particular place, we will be ejected, and it will often be really uncomfortable. I experienced that with Costa Rica. I'll link the video below, but this is also a really common experience where we don't read the signals of what is being transmitted. We're not listening enough to the land and what she's asking of us, not listening enough to the new earth and what it is inviting of us. And it's letting go of those personality level ideas of what our timelines should look like and surrendering ourselves to the higher blueprint, to the higher mission. If you'd have asked me at this point last year if I was going to be traveling again and living nomadically again and having been to 15 countries in 4 months, I would have said, no, I'm building this life for myself in Ireland. But that's not what was designed in my blueprint for this period in my life. And if I'd have been shown that information at that time, I wouldn't have committed properly to the timeline in Ireland. I wouldn't have committed wholly, fully, given, fully merged with that land and just given it everything that I had. I probably, if I'd have been aware of how it was going to shift, that wouldn't have been allowed to, I wouldn't have allowed that process to unfold within myself in the way that it was meant to. So being aware that often we're not shown. Likewise with Phu Quoc, I went for, if I'd have known I was going for 1 day, I probably wouldn't have gone, right? I probably wouldn't have trusted enough that that was the right pathway forward for me. So I had to be given a sort of open-ended, well, who knows how long you might be there, to then realize that actually it was only for a day. And so, we have to be willing to be flexible. And these are just the processes of life, right? We think one thing and then we're shown another. We can only see however far in front of us, and that is part of the design, because otherwise we wouldn't commit fully to our evolutionary processes. If we could see the whole blueprint of what everything was going to look like, we would be so overwhelmed we wouldn't do anything with it, which is why things are revealed within the fullness of time rather than be given the whole blueprint straight away, the whole mission, the whole soul purpose straight away. So just a little bit of energy coming through just to help ground all of this information in. Yeah, and so with grid work as well, it's remembering that we are part of a larger process. We're like these little specks of light that are being moved around perfectly by something so much bigger than ourselves, and that with reverence, with connecting with the land, with listening, with making offerings, all of these things that our ancestors were so attuned to, by bringing these practices back, by connecting with the waters, by connecting with the trees, we are allowing for the land to know, to recognize us, to see us. I say this quite a lot, but the land knows you, right? It knows your soul. It recognizes you, and that might shift from place to place depending on where you've had past lives. If you go somewhere and you feel this really strong resonance, it's like, yeah, because the land knows you and you know the land, and it's through that communication process, it's through that unfolding, it's through connecting with the spirits of the land that we create these shifts, not only within ourselves but within the larger planetary sphere. That it's through that ancient but also new remembering that things are allowed to shift within the greater workings of this planet, within the greater workings of the Great Mother. So anywhere you have bought and sold the idea that you are not able to hear the land, that you don't belong anywhere, that you are, disconnected from your body, that you're disconnected from the place where you just reside, we're going to destroy and uncreate that across all timelines, dimensions, spaces, and realities. I can feel a lot of people who are tuning into this video are either on the precipice of being called somewhere else or are being called to deepen their own connection with the land that they are on. And so a really deep way that we can do this is through the trees. So you may be familiar with the idea of dryads or tree spirits, but they hold so much information about the land. And so by connecting with them, by showing ourselves to them, by acknowledging that we are wanting to connect with them, they begin to show themselves to us. So often I find people will go into nature and maybe they haven't built a deep connection with the land that they are on yet, but they will that will inevitably start to open up. But it does take dedication, it does take commitment to the process for it to happen. It's like when you meet someone, you might not expect them to tell you their whole life story in the first instance of meeting them, right? That takes trust. It takes a level of commitment to engaging in right relationship with someone. And it's the exact same with nature. It's the exact same with the energies of the cosmos. It's by showing that we are committed to those processes that the higher mind of the cosmos itself begins to start to communicate. And it is an act of revelation, right? It is through these deeper processes, commitment, trust, surrender, that things become revealed to us within the fullness of time. So thank you so much for tuning in to this video. And I'm just going to see if there's anything else that wants to come through. The only other thing I'm sensing is sometimes there can be frustration with where we're at, right? So sometimes there can be frustration of like, well, I wouldn't be here if my personality was picking where I would be somewhere else. So, sometimes we need to zero point, sometimes we need to collapse all of these ideas of where we think we should be in order to meet ourselves with where we actually are. Because if you are stationed in one place, even if it feels like you've got a little bit of itchy feet, or you want to, you want to move on to somewhere else, if it hasn't dropped in where you're meant to go yet, then acknowledge that, because maybe there's something deeper that's being asked of you with where you are at right now, a deeper level of acceptance and surrender before those other things can open up. Patience is so important in this life. It is so important in the role of the grid worker. There have been times where I've checked out of my hotel and it hasn't dropped in yet where I'm meant to go next. And sometimes that has involved me booking a flight and going straight to the airport because it's dropped in where I'm going. Other times it's involved me traveling to the other side of the country where I'm at, or, having to take transport to go somewhere else. And within that is that building of patience. It's like, what, I can't see yet, but I know that I will. And I trust that it will be revealed to me. And this has been a huge theme for Saturn in Pisces. Saturn is about structure. It's about systems. And Pisces is about dissolution. It is about dissolving those systems. So much of the journey that we've been on over the past 3-4 years has been about dissolving not only the external structures which no longer support the higher evolution of humanity's consciousness, but also dissolving our inner structures which no longer support the evolution of our own consciousness, right? So just being aware of that, being aware that patience, trust, and surrender, these are all the lessons we're integrating very loudly right now, because that is the energy of Pisces. And I say this as a Pisces stellium, so this is the energies I breathe every day, right? So thank you so much for tuning in. If you have other questions about grid work, then feel free to drop them in the comments and I will get back to you. And if it's something you would like to explore deeper, these are themes that I cover within my mentorship containers as well. So thank you so much for tuning in, and wishing you the most beautiful, beautiful day.